The metallic boots of Lieutenant Kim Jun echoed through the empty corridors of Proxima Station as he made his way toward the restricted section. His shift had ended an hour ago, but curiosity gnawed at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. The other human officers always talked about the mysterious crystalline caves beneath the station, whispering stories about strange lights and haunting sounds that drifted up from the depths. Jun had always been the type to investigate rather than wonder. Back on Earth, his friends called him fearless, though he preferred to think of himself as simply interested in everything the universe had to offer. Tonight, with most of the alien crew members gone for their religious observances, seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally see what lay beneath their feet. The entrance to the caves wasn't particularly well hidden. A simple maintenance hatch led to a spiral staircase that descended into darkness. Jun activated his portable light and began the journey downward, counting each step. 50 steps, 100, 200. The air grew cooler with each level, and soon he could hear the faint tinkling of what sounded like wind chimes made of glass. When he finally reached the bottom, Jun's breath caught in his throat. The cavern stretched out before him like something from a dream. Massive crystals jutted from the floor and ceiling, each one pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light that reminded him of a heartbeat. The walls sparkled with thousands of smaller gems, creating patterns that seemed to shift and dance in his peripheral vision. But it wasn't the beauty of the cave that stopped him cold. It was the figure in the center of the chamber. She knelt on a raised platform of pure crystal, her back turned toward the entrance. Even from behind, Jun could tell she wasn't human. Her skin seemed to shimmer and change color, cycling through, shades of silver and blue like moonlight on water. Long dark hair cascaded down her back, and when she raised her arms above her head, he noticed the elegant way her fingers extended into what looked like delicate claws. Jun knew he should leave. Every instinct screamed at him to back away quietly and pretend he'd never been there, but fascination rooted him to the spot. He'd studied dozens of alien species during his training, but he'd never seen anything like this transformation taking place before his eyes. The woman's skin began to glow brighter, and suddenly the air around her shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Her form seemed to blur and shift, as if she were becoming something else entirely. Wisps of light danced around her body, and for a moment, Jun could swear he saw the ghostly outline of massive wings spreading behind her shoulders. Then she turned around. Their eyes met across the crystal chamber, and time seemed to freeze. Her face was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with high cheekbones and large luminous eyes that held depths Jun couldn't fathom. But what struck him most was the expression of pure terror that crossed her features when she saw him standing. There, the glowing stopped instantly. The dancing lights vanished. Even the crystals seemed to dim as if responding to her shock. For several heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then her lips parted, and she whispered something in a language Jun didn't recognize. The words sounded like a prayer or perhaps a curse. He realized with a sinking feeling in his stomach that he had just witnessed something he was never meant to see. Princess Nara's composure crumbled like a dam bursting under pressure. Tears streamed down her iridescent cheeks as she sank to her knees on the crystal platform, her shoulders shaking with each sob. The transformation that had made her seem so powerful moments before was completely gone, leaving behind a young woman who looked utterly devastated. "You don't understand what you've done," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No outsider has ever seen the binding ritual. Ever." She looked up at Jun with eyes that held both fear and something that might have been pity. "My brothers will come soon. They always guard me during the ceremony from outside the caves." Jun took a careful step forward, his hands raised peacefully. "I'm sorry. I didn't know this place was sacred. I can leave and never speak of what I saw." Nara's laugh was bitter and hollow. "It doesn't work that way. Our laws are older than your entire species." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of silver where her tears had been. "The penalty for witnessing the binding is death. There are no exceptions." Heavy footsteps echoed from the cave entrance, accompanied by the distinctive hum of energy weapons charging up. 3 massive figures emerged from the shadows, each one wearing the traditional armor of Valtherian warriors. Their faces were hidden behind ceremonial masks, but their body language radiated barely controlled rage. The tallest of the three removed his mask, revealing features that were clearly related to Nara's, but harder, more angular. "Sister, we heard you cry out. What has this human done to you?" "Grix, please." Nara stood slowly, placing herself between June and her brothers. He didn't mean any harm, he was just exploring. The second brother, slightly shorter but broader in the shoulders, stepped forward with his weapon raised. Intent. "Doesn't matter, Van. He has seen what cannot be seen." His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "The law is clear." Kyle, the youngest but still intimidating, began pacing around June like a predator circling prey. "Look at him, brothers. He doesn't even have the sense to run or beg for his life. Typical human arrogance." But June surprised them all by speaking calmly. "I understand that I violated something sacred to your people. Can you help me understand exactly what that means?" He looked directly at each brother in turn, showing no fear despite the energy blades humming just inches from his throat. Grix paused in his weapon preparation, caught off guard by the question. "Thurston, want to understand our laws?" "Of course," June replied simply. "If I'm going to die for breaking them, I'd like to know why they exist. Every culture has reasons for their most important rules." Van lowered his weapon slightly, confusion replacing anger on his face. "Most aliens we capture just scream about their rights or try to bargain with us." Nara watched this exchange with growing amazement. She had expected June to panic, to run, to do anything except stand there asking thoughtful questions about Valtherian customs. His calm curiosity reminded her of the scholars she'd met from other worlds, but none of them had ever shown such composure when facing death. "The binding ritual connects our people to our ancestral spirits," she found herself explaining. "It's the most private, most sacred moment in a Valtherian's life. For an outsider to witness it," she struggled to find words that would make sense to a human. "It's like someone watching your soul being born." June nodded slowly. "I can see why that would be protected, but you mentioned there was an alternative to execution." Kyle stopped pacing and stared at him. "You would actually consider it?" "I'd like to know what my options are." Nara's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Marriage, immediate binding to our clan. You would become family, and family is allowed to witness the ritual." She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "But it would mean giving up your human life forever." The cave fell silent except for the gentle humming of the crystals around them. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Though June knew, it had only been a few seconds. He could feel the weight of 4 pairs of alien eyes studying him, waiting for his decision. Death or marriage to a complete stranger. Most people would see those as the only 2 choices available, but June had always been the type to look for door number 3. "I appreciate you explaining my options," he said carefully, "but I'm wondering if there might be another way to handle this situation." Grix's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Another way? Human, you seem to think this is some kind of negotiation. Our laws don't have loopholes." "I'm not looking for a loophole," June replied, keeping his voice steady. "I'm thinking about what your law is really trying to protect. You want to make sure that outsiders who learn your most sacred secrets can be trusted, right?" Vaughn frowned, his grip tightening on his energy blade. "The law exists because outsiders cannot be trusted. That's why the penalty is so severe. But what if an outsider could prove they were trustworthy?" June took a small step forward, ignoring the way all 3 brothers tensed. "What if there was a way to test whether someone deserved to know your secrets?" Kyle shook his head in disbelief. "You want us to give you a test instead of following our most sacred law?" "Every culture has ways to prove worthiness," June continued. "Even humans do. We have trials, challenges, ceremonies that people go through to earn respect and trust. Don't Valtherians have something similar?" For the first time since her brothers had arrived, Nara spoke up. "The trials of honor," she said quietly. "But those are for Valtherian youth coming of age. They've never been given to an outsider." Grix turned to stare at his sister. "Nara, you can't be seriously considering this ridiculous idea." "Why not?" she asked, and June was surprised to hear a note of defiance in her voice. "He's not asking us to break our laws. He's asking if there's a way to earn the right to live with the knowledge he now has." "Because he's human," Vaughn snapped. Humans don't understand honor the way we do. They're weak, selfish creatures who think only of themselves. June felt a flash of irritation, but pushed it down. Getting angry wouldn't help anyone. What exactly would these trials test? Nara looked at her brothers, then back at June. Courage in the face of danger, wisdom in making difficult choices, loyalty to those who depend on you, sacrifice for the greater good, respect for traditions you don't fully understand, truth even when lies would be easier, and finally, the strength to do what's right, even when no one is watching. 7 trials, Kyle said slowly. Each one designed to test virtues that most aliens don't possess. And if I fail any of them? Then you die, Grix said bluntly. But at least you die having earned some small measure of respect. June considered this for a moment. 7 unknown challenges, each one potentially fatal, all designed by people who already believed he was incapable of success. On the other hand, the alternative was certain death right now or marriage to someone he'd just met. How long would I have to complete these trials? Traditionally, they're spread over a full season, Nara answered. 3 months. And during that time? You would live among us, she said. Learn our ways. Prove that you can understand what it means to be Valtherian. Vaughn was shaking his head vigorously. This is madness. Father will never agree to this. Father respects the old traditions, Nara countered. If the human is willing to face the trials, then he's showing more courage than most who simply accept death. June looked around the crystal cave, at the alien weapons still pointed in his direction, at the princess who was defending a stranger against her own family. I accept, he said simply. The brothers exchanged glances. Finally, Grix lowered his weapon. Very well, human, but understand this. These trials will push you beyond anything your soft species has ever faced. Most Valtherian youth fail at least one. I understand the risks. Kyle stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. And when you fail, there will be no mercy. No second chances. June met his gaze steadily. I wouldn't expect any. The first trial came. 3 days later, and June failed spectacularly. The test of strength required him to lift a ceremonial stone that weighed nearly twice what any human could manage. While young Valtherian warriors hoisted it above their heads with relative ease, June could barely get it off the ground. His face turned red with effort, sweat poured down his forehead, and after 5 minutes of struggle, he had to admit defeat. The watching crowd murmured among themselves. Some laughed openly, others shook their heads as if they'd expected nothing better from a soft human. But War Chief Torval, Nara's father, held up his hand for silence. The trials test more than muscle, he announced. We continue. The second trial didn't go much better. Racing across treacherous mountain terrain, June fell behind immediately. His human lungs couldn't process the thin air as efficiently as Valtherian respiratory systems. His legs weren't built for the long loping strides that carried his competitors across loose rocks and steep inclines. He finished dead last, limping and exhausted. More murmurs from the crowd, more doubtful looks. It was during the 3rd day, while June recovered from his physical failures, that everything changed. 2 Valtherian families had been feuding for generations over water rights to a mountain stream. The Keith clan claimed their ancestors had discovered it first. The Moore clan insisted their bloodline had been blessed by the water spirit centuries ago. Both sides carried weapons. Both sides had already lost members to violence. The situation was escalating toward all-out war. The clan elders had tried every traditional solution. Honor duels only resulted in more deaths. Mediators from both families were too invested in the outcome to remain impartial. War Chief Torval was considering splitting the water source in half, even though everyone knew that would satisfy neither. June asked if he could try a different approach. What could you possibly offer? Demanded Keith's eldest son. You're not even one of us. Maybe that's exactly why I can help, June replied calmly. He spent 2 days talking to members of both families, not the leaders or the warriors, but the children, the elderly, the ones who carried water for daily use. He listened to their stories about the stream, about what it meant to their lives beyond just ownership and pride. On the 3rd day, he called both clans together. So you're both right, he began, which immediately caused an uproar. When the shouting died down, he continued, "The Keth clan did discover this stream first. Your great-grandfather found it during a hunting expedition 60 years ago, but the Moor clan was blessed by the water spirits just as you claim." "Impossible," snarled the Moor leader. "We can't both be right." "So you can, because you're arguing about different things." June gestured toward the stream. "Keth found the water, but Moor's grandmother was the first person to purify it properly. She's the one who figured out how to filter out the harmful minerals that were making people sick. Without her knowledge, finding the stream would have been useless." He let that sink in before continuing. "Instead of fighting over who owns the water, why not honor both contributions? Keth maintains the source and protects it from contamination. Moor teaches the purification techniques to other clans and oversees distribution. Both families become guardians instead of competitors." The two clan leaders stared at each other, then at June. "That could actually work," admitted Keth's eldest son. "It honors both our histories," Moor's daughter added thoughtfully. Within a week, the feud was over. Both clans were working together, and their combined knowledge had actually improved the water quality for everyone in the region. Word of the humans' solution spread quickly through the valley. Soon other problems were being brought to his attention. A farming dispute here, a trade disagreement there. Each time, June found ways to help both sides win instead of forcing one to lose. Then came the sickness. A group of young warriors returned from a border patrol with fever and stomach problems. The clan healers tried their traditional remedies, but the illness was getting worse. More warriors were falling sick each day. June recognized the symptoms immediately. "It's waterborne bacteria," he explained to the healers. "Probably from a contaminated source near the border." The lead healer bristled. "Our water purification has worked for centuries." "I'm sure it has, but this might be a new strain. On Earth, we've learned that boiling water isn't always enough. You need to—" He paused, realizing he was about to suggest changes to sacred traditions. "Would you be willing to try something additional? Something that works alongside your current methods?" Within days, June had helped them set up simple filtration systems using local materials. The sick warriors began recovering. More importantly, no new cases appeared. But perhaps his greatest success came with a young warrior named Dex who had returned from his first battle completely shattered. The teenager couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and jumped at every unexpected sound. The other warriors whispered that he was weak, that he lacked courage. June sat with Dex for hours, just listening. He recognized the signs immediately, what humans called post-traumatic stress. Instead of lecturing about courage or strength, he helped Dex understand that his mind was trying to protect him from danger, even when he was safe. "Your brain learned to stay alert to keep you alive," June explained. "That's not weakness. That's your mind being so good at its job that it doesn't know how to turn off." Slowly, patiently, he taught Dex techniques for managing the overwhelming feelings, breathing exercises, ways to ground himself when memories became too vivid. Most importantly, he helped the young warrior understand that healing takes time, and that asking for help is its own form of courage. When Dex finally returned to active duty, he sought out June personally. "You saved my life without ever lifting a weapon," he said quietly. The watching Valtherians began to see something they hadn't expected. This human wasn't trying to prove he was stronger or faster or better than them. Instead, he was making all of them stronger, faster, better than they'd been before. The training sessions began at dawn, when the crystalline caves were still cool, and the morning light filtered through the crystal formations like scattered rainbows. Nara had volunteered to help June prepare for the remaining trials, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps it was curiosity about this strange human, who faced death with questions instead of fear. "Your stance is all wrong," she said on the first morning, circling around him as he held a practice blade. "Valtherian combat is about flowing like water, not standing rigid like a tree." June adjusted his position, trying to copy the graceful movements she demonstrated. "Like this? Better, but you're still thinking too much." Nara moved behind him, gently adjusting his arms and shoulders. Combat isn't a puzzle to solve, it's a dance to feel. What surprised her was how quickly he adapted once he stopped trying to force it. His movements became smoother, more natural. He would never have the raw power of a Valtherian warrior, but there was something elegant about the way he learned to work with his limitations instead of against them. "You're different from what I expected," she admitted during a break between exercises. June wiped sweat from his forehead with a towel. "Different how? Most humans I've met are either terrified of us or trying to prove they're just as strong. You don't seem to care about either." He considered this while drinking from his water bottle. "I learned a long time ago that trying to be something you're not is exhausting. I'd rather figure out how to be the best version of what I actually am." Over the following weeks, their training sessions evolved into something more than just combat preparation. Between sword forms and defensive techniques, they found themselves talking about everything and nothing. June learned that being the only daughter in a family of warriors meant constantly proving herself in ways her brothers never had to consider. "They love me," Nara said one afternoon as they practiced hand-to-hand combat, "but they also see me as something precious that needs protecting. They don't understand that I want to protect things too." "What would you protect if you could choose?" June asked, easily dodging her practice strike. His reflexes had improved dramatically over the past month. "Knowledge," she answered without hesitation. "Our people are so focused on physical strength that we sometimes forget how much wisdom we're losing. Old songs, ancient techniques, stories that teach us who we are." She paused mid-attack. "What about you? What drives you?" "Connection," June said simply. "I think most problems in the universe come from people not understanding each other. Every time I can help bridge that gap, even a little bit, it feels worthwhile." Their conversations were often interrupted by her brothers, who had taken to observing the training sessions with increasing interest. At first, they came to mock the weak human's pathetic attempts at Valtherian combat. But as the weeks passed, their attitude shifted. "He's actually getting better," Vaughn admitted grudgingly after watching June successfully complete a complex defensive sequence. "It's not about the technique," Grix observed. "Look how he adapts to what Nara teaches him. Most warriors try to impose their own style. He finds ways to make her style work for his body." Kyle, the youngest and previously the most hostile, surprised everyone by approaching June directly after one session. "That thing you did with young Dex," he said awkwardly, "the warrior who was struggling after his first battle? What about it? I've seen other young warriors with the same problem. Would you teach me how to help them?" June nodded immediately. "Of course. But first, let me ask, have you ever experienced anything like what Dex went through?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Warriors don't discuss such weaknesses." "It's not weakness," June said gently. "And you don't have to discuss it if you don't want to. But understanding your own experiences often makes it easier to help others with theirs." Later that evening, Nara found June sitting alone outside the caves, looking up at the unfamiliar constellations. "My brothers are starting to respect you," she said, settling down beside him. "I noticed. Kyle asked for help with something today. That's huge for him. He's always been the one trying to prove he's just as tough as Grix and Vaughn." She was quiet for a moment. "You know what I think is really happening?" "What's that?" "You're showing them that there are different ways to be strong. They've always thought strength meant never needing help from anyone, but you ask for help constantly, and somehow that makes you more capable, not less." June smiled. "On Earth we have a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." "I like that." Nara drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Of course." "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to choose my own path, instead of following the one my family expects. To be valued for my mind, instead of just protected because of my gender." She glanced at him sideways. "Does that make me selfish?" "It makes you human," June said, then caught himself. "Sorry, I mean it makes you normal, natural. Everyone should have the right to choose their own purpose, even if that choice disappoints the people you love. Especially then. The people who really love you want you to be happy, even if your happiness looks different from what they imagined." As they sat together under the alien stars, both of them realized that something fundamental had shifted. What had begun as a desperate bargain to save June's life had become something neither of them had expected, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. And perhaps though neither was ready to admit it yet, something even deeper than the attack came at dawn when most of the warriors were still asleep. June was practicing his morning exercises in the crystal caves when the ground began to shake. At first he thought it might be a minor earthquake. Proxima Station had experienced them before, but the tremors felt wrong somehow, too rhythmic, too purposeful. Then the screaming started. He raced to the surface to find chaos erupting across the valley. Strange writhing shapes moved through the settlement like living shadows, but these weren't ordinary creatures. They seemed to shift and change as he watched, sometimes looking almost humanoid, other times resembling massive insects or serpents made of dark energy. "Void spawn," someone shouted, and the word sent ice through June's veins. He'd heard stories about these creatures during his time with the Valtherians, whispered tales that everyone hoped were just legends. Nara appeared at his side, fully armed and ready for battle. "They're real," she said grimly. "And they're here, the power." Void spawn moved through the settlement with terrifying efficiency. Wherever they touched a Valtherian warrior, something horrible happened. The creatures seemed to absorb not just life, but knowledge, skills, even memories. June watched in horror as a seasoned fighter was engulfed by one of the shadow beings, only to see the creature emerge moments later, moving with the exact same combat techniques the warrior had just used. "They learn from us," Nara breathed, her face pale with realization. "Every time we fight them, they become better at fighting us." War Chief Torval was already organizing the defense, his voice booming across the valley as he rallied his warriors. "Form the traditional battle lines. Use formation Delta 7. But June could see the flaw in that strategy immediately. Formation Delta 7 was a classic Valtherian tactic, one that had been used successfully for generations. The problem was, several warriors had already tried it against the Void Spawn, and now the creatures knew exactly how to counter it. "This isn't going to work," he told Nara urgently. "Every strategy you use just makes them stronger." "Then what do you suggest?" she snapped, frustrated and scared. "That we just stand here and let them destroy us?" Before June could answer, a messenger arrived with even worse news. The outer settlements had fallen. 3 entire clans had been wiped out in less than an hour. The Void Spawn weren't just attacking randomly. They were systematically working their way through every Valtherian territory, absorbing the knowledge and abilities of each group they conquered. "They're getting smarter with each victory," Johnny realized aloud. "And stronger. By the time they reach the main settlements, they'll know every fighting technique, every defensive strategy, every weapon your people have ever used." Grix overheard him and stormed over, his face twisted with anger and desperation. "Then we die with honor. It's better than cowering like frightened children." "No, it's not," June said firmly. "Dying with honor doesn't help anyone if it means these things spread to other worlds and kill more innocent people." The argument was interrupted by another wave of attacks. The Void Spawn had reached the outer defenses of their settlement, and they moved with the coordinated precision of experienced Valtherian warriors. Every technique the defenders used against them was instantly copied and turned back on them. June watched the battle unfold with growing understanding. The Valtherians were incredible fighters, but they relied on tradition, on proven methods passed down through generations. Against an enemy that could instantly learn and adapt to any technique, their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. "I need to talk to your father," he told Nara urgently. "Now? In the middle of a battle? Especially now." June grabbed her arm gently. "Nara, I think I see something, a pattern, but I need authority to try something completely different." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Follow me." They found War Chief Torval directing the defense from a strategic position overlooking the valley. His face was grim as he watched his warriors struggle against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. "Human," he acknowledged June curtly. "If you have wisdom to offer, speak quickly." "The Void Spawn learn from success," June said, without preamble. "Every time your warriors use a technique that works, even briefly, these creatures absorb it and improve on it. They're turning your own skills against you." "Tell me something I don't already know," Torval growled. "They can only learn from what they experience directly. They're like like students who can only absorb lessons they're taught in person. June's mind was racing as the pieces fell into place. But what if we taught them the wrong lessons? Vaughn, who had been listening nearby, stepped closer. What do you mean? What if we deliberately used flawed techniques? Strategies with built-in weaknesses that only we know about. They'd absorb the techniques, but they wouldn't understand the flaws until it was too late. Kyle shook his head. That would mean sacrificing warriors to teach these things false information. Who would be willing to die for such an uncertain plan? June met his eyes steadily. I would. The silence that followed was broken only by the sounds of battle in the distance. Finally, Torval spoke. Explain your full plan, human. Quickly. As June outlined his strategy, he could see understanding dawn on the faces around him. It was risky, unconventional, and required a level of coordination the Valtherians had never attempted before, but it was also the first plan anyone had proposed. That didn't play directly into the Void Spawn's strengths. It could work, Nara said slowly, but only if we can get every clan to coordinate perfectly. One mistake, and the whole thing falls apart. Then we better not make any mistakes, June replied grimly. In the distance, another settlement's lights went dark. Getting the scattered clans to work together was like trying to herd cats, if cats carried energy weapons and had centuries-old grudges against each other. The Keth clan will never coordinate with the Moor clan, War Chief Torval said bluntly, as they huddled around a makeshift communication center. They've been enemies for generations. They won't have generations if we don't stop the Void Spawn, June replied, frantically adjusting the human communication equipment he'd requisitioned from Proxima Station. Look, I know this goes against everything your people believe about honor and individual glory. But right now, survival is more important than tradition. The first challenge was simply reaching the other clans. Valtherian communication systems were designed for formal ceremonial exchanges between leaders. They had never needed to coordinate rapid battlefield communications across multiple territories simultaneously. June's human tech could handle that kind of network traffic, but he had to convince proud clan leaders to trust alien technology. This is clan leader Vex of the Northern Territories, came the first crackling voice over the comm system. I'm told a human wants to give me orders? Not orders, June said carefully. Suggestions. Your scouts have reported Void Spawn movement toward your eastern border, correct? Correct. We're preparing to meet them with honor. And they'll absorb every technique you use, then turn it against the next clan they attack. June pulled up tactical displays on his portable computer. But what if instead of fighting them directly, you led them into a trap? Made them think they were chasing retreating cowards. The silence stretched long enough that June wondered if he'd lost the connection. Finally, Vex spoke again. You want us to run from battle? I want you to pretend to run from battle. There's a difference. Over the next hour, June found himself playing diplomat, strategist, and translator all at once. Each clan leader had the same initial reaction, outrage at the suggestion that they abandon traditional combat methods. But as reports kept coming, in of more settlements falling, practical necessity began to override cultural pride. The Void Spawn are moving faster than expected, Nara reported, monitoring communications from multiple sources. They've absorbed techniques from 6 different clans now. They're becoming incredibly sophisticated. Good, June said, which earned him several startled looks. The more they think they know about Valtherian tactics, the easier it'll be to surprise them. The plan he'd devised was elegantly simple in concept, nightmarishly complex in execution. Instead of each clan fighting independently with their traditional methods, they would coordinate a series of seemingly unrelated skirmishes across multiple territories. Each engagement would appear to be a standard Valtherian battle, complete, with traditional formations and well-known tactics. But hidden within each confrontation would be subtle modifications, tiny changes that would seem insignificant to the Void Spawn, but would actually set up vulnerabilities for later exploitation. Think of it like a chess game, June explained to the assembled clan leaders via holographic conference. We're going to let them capture our pieces, but each piece they take will weaken their position without them realizing it. The first test came when the Moor clan encountered a Void Spawn advance force. Instead of their usual aggressive assault, They used a modified version of Formation Beta 3 that deliberately exposed their left flank. The Void Spawn eagerly absorbed this flawed technique, not realizing that the flaw was intentional. It worked, came the report from Moore's war leader. They copied our formation exactly, including the weakness we built into it. Phase 2 is... Ergo, June announced to the network. The Keth clan engaged next using a defensive strategy that appeared solid, but contained a hidden timing vulnerability. The Hran clan followed with an offensive technique that looked devastating, but required precise positioning that could be easily disrupted. Each encounter added another layer to the trap, but the real challenge came when all the scattered elements had to come together for the final confrontation. The Void Spawn, gorged on absorbed knowledge from multiple clans, converged on the main settlement with confidence. They now possessed what they believed was the complete tactical knowledge of the Valtherian people. All units, this is coordination. Central, June spoke into his headset as the massive shadow forms approached across the valley. Remember, timing is everything. If even one clan jumps early, this whole thing falls apart. He could see them now through his binoculars, dozens of Void Spawn moving in perfect Valtherian formations, using techniques they'd stolen from their victims. They advanced with the precision of master tacticians, completely unaware that they were walking into the most sophisticated trap in Valtherian history. Northern units, begin your retreat, June ordered. Across the battlefield, Vex's warriors turned and ran, appearing to panic in the face of the overwhelming enemy force. The Void Spawn pursued eagerly, using the exact pursuit formation they'd learned from the Moore clan, the one with the hidden left flank vulnerability. Eastern units, execute feint pattern 7. More Valtherian warriors appeared to break and scatter, leading the Void Spawn deeper into the trap. The shadow creatures spread out to pursue, adopting the defensive postures they'd absorbed from the Keth clan, the ones with the timing vulnerability. Southern units now. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Warriors who had been hidden in prepared positions erupted from concealment, attacking the exact weak points that had been deliberately built into every technique the Void Spawn had learned. The creatures found themselves using flawed tactics against enemies who knew exactly where those flaws were. But the most beautiful part wasn't the tactical victory, it was watching sworn enemies work together flawlessly. Keth warriors covered more. Flanks without hesitation. Hran scouts provided intelligence that saved northern lives. For the first time in their history, the Valtherian clans fought as a single, unified force. "Target the formation centers!" Nara's voice rang out as she led a charge against a group of confused Void Spawn. They're trying to adapt, but they can't process the flaws fast enough. The battle wasn't easy, and it wasn't without cost. But for the first time since the attacks began, the Void Spawn were the ones retreating, unable to adapt quickly enough to tactics that changed every few minutes based on coordinated signals from a central command. As the last of the shadow creatures fled into the darkness, a cheer went up from warriors across the valley. They had done something that had never been done before. They had fought as one people instead of a dozen rival clans. The celebration lasted 3 days, but June barely noticed the festivities happening around him. Something felt different now, and it took him a while to figure out what it was. For the first time in months, he wasn't looking over his shoulder, waiting for someone to remind him that his life hung by a thread. War Chief Torval found him on the morning of the 4th day, sitting alone near the crystal caves where everything had started. The older Valtherian's approach was quieter than usual, less formal. "You've been avoiding the victory ceremonies," Torval observed, settling down on a nearby rock with a grunt. "I wasn't sure I belonged there," June admitted. "I know I helped, but it was your people who did the real fighting." Torval was quiet for a long moment, studying the human who had changed everything. "Do you know what the Council of Elders decided yesterday?" June's stomach tightened. He'd been dreading this conversation, knowing it had to come eventually. "About my status?" "About your trials. Specifically, about whether you've completed them." The war chief's weathered face gave nothing away. "The consensus was unanimous. You have not only completed the 7 traditional trials, you've exceeded them in ways our ancestors never imagined." The relief was overwhelming, but it came with an unexpected twist of something that might have been disappointment. "So I'm free to go." "You are free to choose," Torval corrected. "The law that bound you here no longer applies. You've proven your worth beyond any doubt. The knowledge you carry of our sacred rituals is yours by right now, not by obligation." June nodded slowly. "And Nara is also free to choose. The marriage law was invoked to protect our secrets and honor our traditions. Since you fulfilled both requirements through your actions rather than through marriage, she is under no obligation to bind herself to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the morning light filter through the crystal formations. Finally, Torval spoke again. "There's something else you should know. The clans have asked me to offer you a position." That caught June by surprise. "What kind of position?" "Coordinator of inter-clan relations. It's a new role we're creating, based on what you accomplished during the battle. Someone needs to maintain the communication networks you established, help resolve disputes between clans, facilitate the kind of cooperation that saved us all." The war chief's expression grew thoughtful. "It would mean staying here permanently, becoming part of our people, not through marriage law, but through choice." Before June could respond, footsteps approached from behind. He turned to see Nara walking toward them, her expression unreadable. Behind her came her 3 brothers, all looking unusually serious. "Father," Nara said formally, "I need to speak with June, privately." Torval rose from his seat, giving June a meaningful look. "Think about what I said. The offer stands regardless of what other decisions you make." As the war chief walked away, Grick stepped forward. "Human," he said, and his voice held none of its former hostility. "Before our sister speaks with you, we have something to say." Vaan nodded, looking almost embarrassed. "We owe you an apology. We judged you by our own standards instead of recognizing your different strengths." "You saved not just our clan, but all our people," Kyle added. "That makes you our brother in the truest sense, regardless of marriage laws or formal ceremonies." Grix extended his hand in the traditional Valtherian gesture of respect between equals. "If you choose to stay among us, you will always have our loyalty. If you choose to leave, you will always have our gratitude." After her brothers departed, Nara sat down beside June on the rocky outcropping. For a long time, neither of them spoke, both lost in their own thoughts. "So," she said eventually, "we're both free. Seems that way. No more laws forcing us to be together. No more obligations or expectations." Her voice was carefully neutral, but June caught something underneath it. "Are you happy about that?" he asked gently. Nara was quiet for so long that he wondered if she was going to answer. When she finally spoke, her words were barely above a whisper. "I thought I would be. For my whole life, everyone else has made decisions for me. What I should study, how I should behave, who I should marry. When the law bound us together, it felt like just another choice being taken away. And now I realize that somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like a burden." She turned to look at him directly. "When did that happen? When did I start looking forward to our training sessions, not because I had to, but because I wanted to? When did your opinion start mattering more to me than my brother's approval?" June felt his heart skip a beat. "For me, it was the day you defended my idea about the trials. You barely knew me, but you were willing to argue with your family on my behalf. That's when I knew you were someone special." "I've never had a choice in who I could love before," Nara said softly. "It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." "What do you choose?" June asked, though he was almost afraid to hear the answer. Instead of responding with words, Nara reached out and took his hand. Her fingers intertwined with his, and for the first time since they'd met, the gesture had nothing to do with law or duty or obligation. "I choose you," she said simply. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you see me as I am, not as what others expect me to be." Joan squeezed her hand gently. "And I choose you, not because of marriage laws or trial requirements, but because you're brave and kind, and you make me want to be better than I am." As they sat together in the morning light, both of them finally, free to choose their own paths, they realized that the best choices are the ones made with an open heart, rather than a bound one. The wedding preparations took 6 months, not because either June or Nara wanted an elaborate ceremony, but because no one had ever tried to blend human and Valtherian traditions before. Every detail required careful negotiation between two completely different ways of celebrating love and commitment. "The crystal formations are perfect for the ceremony," Nara said, walking through the caves where they'd first met. "But your people will need seating arrangements, and mine prefer to stand during sacred rituals." June smiled, watching her pace excitedly as she planned. "We could do graduated levels. Standing room in front for Valtherians, seated areas behind for humans. That way everyone feels comfortable." It was typical of how they'd learned to solve problems together, finding solutions that honored both perspectives instead of forcing one to compromise. The guest list alone was a diplomatic challenge. Representatives from Earth's United Nations were flying in alongside clan leaders from across Valtherian space. Admiral Chen from the Human Space Command would stand next to War Chief Torval. Dr. Kim from the Xenobiology Institute was bringing translation equipment to help human guests understand Valtherian blessing songs. "My grandmother is convinced you're going to turn into a human during the ceremony," Nara told him with amusement. "She keeps asking if I'm sure I want to marry someone who might change species without warning. And my parents keep asking if you're going to grow fangs and claws during the reception," June replied. "I think they're picturing something out of an old horror movie." The actual ceremony turned out to be more beautiful than either of them had imagined. They'd decided to hold it at sunset, when the crystal caves glowed with natural light that needed no artificial enhancement. Nara wore traditional Valtherian ceremonial armor, polished to mirror brightness, with flowing fabric that caught the light as she moved. June wore a formal Earth diplomatic uniform, but with Valtherian honor, markings embroidered along the sleeves, a symbol of the two worlds he now belonged to. The exchange of vows was the most challenging part to plan. Valtherian wedding promises were formal, ancient and spoken in their traditional language. Human vows were personal, contemporary, and varied from couple to couple. They decided to speak twice, once in each tradition. When Nara spoke her Valtherian vows, her voice rang clear and strong through the cavern, promising to guard June's honor as fiercely as her own, to stand beside him in battle and in peace, to bind her strength to his for all their days. The words were centuries old, but her delivery made them feel fresh and immediate. June's human vows were simpler, but no less meaningful. "I promise to love you not despite our differences, but because of them," he said, looking directly into Woe, her luminous eyes. "I promise to learn from you, to grow with you, and to always remember that the best solutions come when different perspectives work together." The reception afterward was a masterpiece of cultural fusion. Valtherian war songs, mixed with human dance music. Traditional Earth cuisine sat alongside Valtherian delicacies that glowed faintly in the dim light. Children from both species ran around together, already forming friendships that would shape the future. But perhaps the most significant moment came when Admiral Chen approached Nara during the celebration. "I have a proposition for you," she said formally. "Earth needs an ambassador to the Valtherian territories, someone who understands both cultures, who can help us build the kind of cooperation your husband orchestrated during the Void Spawn crisis." Nara looked surprised. "You want me to represent Earth to my own people?" "I want you to represent understanding to both peoples," Admiral Chen corrected. "The position would be based on Earth 6 months of the year, Valtherian space for the other. 6? You'd help establish exchange programs, facilitate trade agreements, and serve as a living example of what's possible when different species work together." Meanwhile, War Chief Torval was making a similar offer to June. "The Valtherian Council has authorized the creation of a new position, Director of Interspecies Relations. Your job would be to help other species learn what you've taught us about cooperation and problem-solving." As the celebration continued around them, June and Nara found a quiet moment together on a balcony overlooking the valley where they'd fought side by side against the Void Spawn. "So," Nara said, leaning against him, "ready to spend our honeymoon setting up diplomatic programs?" "Can't think of anything I'd rather do," June replied, wrapping his arms around her. "Though I have to admit, 6 months ago I never imagined my life would turn out like this." 6 months ago, I thought the only choice I'd ever have was which weapon to carry into battle, Nara said softly. Now look at us. We're about to become the bridge between two worlds. In the distance, they could see the lights of Proxima Station, where humans and Valtherians were already working together on joint research projects. Trade ships from both species shared the same docking bays. Children learned each other's languages in integrated schools. You know what I think our real accomplishment is? June said thoughtfully. What's that? We proved that the scariest differences between people are usually the most superficial ones. Underneath all the cultural stuff, all the traditions and customs and ways of doing things, most beings want the same basic things. Safety for their families, respect for their contributions, the chance to build something better for the next generation. Nara nodded, watching a group of human and Valtherian engineers working together to repair some of the battle damage from months before. And that's what makes humans so special, isn't it? You don't just tolerate differences. You find ways to make them into strengths. As the night deepened and the celebration gradually wound down, the newlywed couple stood together looking up at stars that belonged to both their peoples now. Their marriage was more than a personal commitment. It was a symbol of everything that was possible when courage met understanding, when different perspectives combined to create something stronger than either could achieve alone. In the years to come, historians would mark their wedding as the beginning of the Great Cooperation, the era when humanity's gift for building bridges transformed the galaxy. But for June and Nara, it was simply the first day of a life they'd chosen together, freely and completely. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility. Watched ancient enemies embrace each other in victory at